Thank you for joining us for The Hidden Children on Ohmer Street, Part 3. I'm Bryn Caswell.
And I'm Colin Dorsey. It's been a while since we provided one of these updates, but this week we got a lot of new information. Dozens of court documents involving Gallia County Children's Services revealed some new details about these 16 children.
Plus, we are getting a clear timeline of the investigation that led investigators to the Siders' home on Ohmer Street, where they found the 16 children and the 4 adults inside. But we want to start with that first investigation. And that leads us to 2 men who are accused of sex crimes with a minor. So the Ohio Attorney General's office says the investigation began in December of 2025 after authorities received allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. And this takes us to these 2 men who are from South Bloomingville. This is 40-year-old Brandon Henderson. This is his mugshot there. He's been indicted on 21 counts for endangering children and gross sexual imposition charges. And now I want to show you 23-year-old Josh Saunders. He has been indicted on 4 counts, 3 counts of rape, and 1 count of gross sexual imposition. And these 2 men, they were not arrested until August. So again, this investigation, we are told by the AG's office, started in December of 2025, and then they were later arrested in August. And they're now being held on a $250,000 bond.
This is how we get to this second investigation. And this is all while the Bureau of Criminal Investigations was investigating those original allegations. Investigators say they then uncovered information pointing them toward another possible crime involving a minor. This all happened March 2026. Now, this time, investigators were looking into allegations involving these 2, Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. They are the parents of the 16 children found inside that house. Both are currently accused of sexual battery and unlawful conduct with a minor. Prosecutors say these 2, the conduct happened between January and September of 2022, and authorities say that the minor in this case, the victim in this case, was not one of their children.
And during the investigation, investigators served a warrant at that home in Hamden on Ohmer Street, the Siders' home, and that's when they found the 16 kids and the 4 adults. And through records requests, 10TV was able to determine the connection between the 2 men in the first investigation and Gary and Elizabeth Siders. 10TV's Kristen McFarland explains the Siders family tree in connection to all of these investigations.
Let's walk through what we know about the family connections right now. 16 children ages 18 months to 18 years old were discovered in a Hamden home in June. 4 adults were also living in that home. 2 of them were the grandparents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders. Their son, Gary Siders Jr., is the father. He is married to Elizabeth Siders. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth have 16 living children. State records also revealed the couple had twins that died shortly after birth. Court documents say all 4 adults are charged with child endangerment for living in a home with 16 children in conditions that law enforcement described as deplorable. According to birth records 10TV uncovered, Gary and Christina have another child, Virginia. Records show Virginia married a man named Joshua Saunders Jr. in 2003. Birth records reveal the couple had a son, also named Joshua Saunders. The father is currently serving a prison sentence in Ohio for a 2009 murder conviction. The couple never divorced. According to Gallia County court records, Virginia has since been romantically linked to Brandon Henderson. We have learned through those documents that on March 31, 2026, the court ordered a paternity test for 3 of Virginia's children, ages 13, 14, and 15. The court filing says the court wants to determine through DNA tests whether Brandon Henderson or Joshua Saunders Jr. is the father of any of the 3 children.
We now bring in 10TV News reporter Kristen McFarland. And Kristen, you've spent a lot of time in Southeast Ohio, whether that be Vinton County, Hocking County. You've spent time in these places where this family has connections to, and working to learn more about the 6 people accused in this whole crime setup. And also the big question that still exists is, how could this have gone unnoticed, under the radar for so long?
Yeah, and I think with these new court documents, this is the first time in weeks we are finally getting a glimpse into really anything about this family, these children, and we've been pushing to learn all that information. I've gone through documents and documents of these records.
Got them right there.
And they are detailed out from 2020 and 2021. So we know that court records show child welfare officials had concerns with this family in 2020 and 2021. We are now in 2026, of course, when those children were found. So it gives you an idea. 6 years ago, they were being looked into. We have requested more documents, so we are still learning if there are other times they were reported or investigated. That's not clear at this moment, but we do know of 2 instances where Children's Services was involved with the Siders family. So first, I want to talk through their March 2020 investigation. So we do know that parents seemingly enrolled their kids in Ohio Virtual Academy. That's an online charter school. They reported the family to Gallia County Children's Services, citing concerns about the children's education levels. So this new information we are about to walk through, again, the first time we are getting an understanding into these children's ages as well as education levels. And this is a question we asked officials the very next day after the 16 children were found in that home. I remember asking them, what were these children like? Could they speak? What were their education levels? And that was something that we've been pushing to learn more about. These documents really reveal some of that to us. So I want to start with, in these court records, they do talk about a 7-year-old kid. The child enrolled in late fall 2019 with no prior schooling, and court records show they presented significant developmental delays, inability to speak and complete sentences or initiate conversation. They reported that the child has not been to a pediatrician for evaluation of any medical or developmental delays. Okay, then they go on to speak about a 13-year-old enrolled on January 6, 2020 and February 4th, 2020, that she had not completed any schoolwork. The child was withdrawn by the parents from that virtual school on February 4th of 2020. The child was also enrolled in Gallia Digital Academy on December 12th, but no completion of schoolwork can be provided. They go on to talk about a 12-year-old who had 40% attendance rate, considered off track in math, literature, social studies, and science. And then also an 11-year-old that they gave an assessment to on January in 2020 by the teacher, and it was determined to be a non-reader. So they said that they only knew 14 out of the 26 lowercase letters. They only knew 21 out of the 26 uppercase letters. They knew 0 out of all the 26 letter sounds. So they are really documenting right now, as you can see, some of those significant educational mental delays here for these children. And they said this is according to the standards of what children's levels should be at their age. They said that the words that should be known by kindergarten, the kid only knew the word and can only count from 1 to 12 before making mistakes. So of course, when we are looking at this information, it is pretty shocking to hear that kind of stuff and to get this detail about it. They did also talk about a 9-year-old found that she had not made any academic process within the last 10 weeks.
And instead of removing these children from the situation, the agency actually worked with the parents, Gary and Elizabeth Siders, to develop a plan to get these kids and their education back on track. We know Gary Siders Jr., he had to take a parenting course as well. And the court says they could not go back to the doctor as well because this was all happening during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the case was closed, basically.
Yeah. That's right. And based on court documents, between October when the case was closed and December when the family was reported once again, the Siders did take at least 4 kids to the doctor. But I do want to talk about this second report. So we just walked through the concerns from the school for the first report. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the physical state that some of these children were found in. Children's Services became involved again. We know this in January 2021 based on those Gallia County court records. This time a doctor reported the family because 4 children had elevated lead levels. And as we've been learning, this can be dangerous for developing children to be exposed to lead. There were concerns about whether the parents were following up on medical care. They also had caseworkers reported that there were roaches, gnats, and flies inside the home, and that the adults, which would be Elizabeth and Gary Jr., were always in the same clothing. Caseworkers reported almost 5-year-old cannot speak any clear language, and that there was also reports about concerns about not being able to see the kids or go upstairs when they were going to those homes to try to figure out what was going on inside. Caseworker also witnessed circular linear bruising on the back of one of those kids' thighs and reported concerns of possible abuse or neglect. It is something we did note too in these records that one child had insect bites all over her arms and was seen profusely scratching her head and tugging on her ear. When they asked the parents about the bruising, they said they became agitated and they stated they weren't aware of any bruises. Parents also told the caseworkers one kid has a cavity on the baby tooth, but they were, quote, not concerned about it.
Yeah, and so the court then later found that the family had failed to maintain everything they said they would implement from that prior case. But again, after months of monitoring them, the case was closed yet again. And you spoke to the director of the Athens County Children's Services. We want to note that he has nothing to do with this investigation. But you spoke to him for perspective about this because, as we keep bringing up, we are wondering how all of this just continued to fall through the cracks.
Absolutely. And again, as you mentioned, I want to reiterate Otis Cochran. He is the executive director for the Athens County Children's Services. He was not involved in the Siders case. This was not his agency or his county, but he is speaking in his experience. So I want to put out there that every county and agency may have similar processes, but also different. So the way Gallia County operates their agency could be different than how Franklin County does, how Delaware County does. But he gave me a really good amount of information and insight into kind of how this process works with caseworkers, with children's services, and how they work with families. I asked him how many times a case has to be opened before the county steps in and takes custody of the kids. He explained to me, it doesn't really work that way. Let's take a listen.
It just depends on the progress that's being made. There's been times that in our own situation here in this county, in Athens County, where you have a case plan. And if that parent is meeting the needs of that case plan, it could be something as simple as not having, the proper sanitation system, or having trash that should have been cleaned out of the house. You give them a certain time period for that to take place. And so it's possible to still have that them remain as the parents or have the custodial rights because of them doing the work that was on the safety plan or the case plan, excuse me. So it really just depends. But if they are not making forward progress and they continually are coming back, at some point there's going to be a decision made to ask for permanent custody.
Something Otis also explained to me, which I think is important for people to know, and something that I was wondering. He explained to me that a closed case does not mean abuse or neglect didn't occur. It simply means the parents completed their court-approved plan and met the requirements set by their program or agency. So again, this is different. So we can't speak to Gallia County agency, but we can speak to the fact that a closed case, they still reported possible abuse or neglect, but because those parents went through that court-approved plan and, then they went to the court. There are multiple people part of this process, but a judge does sign on that final decision.
Right. And in some of my previous reporting with Franklin County Children's Services, that question's come up before of, why weren't these certain children removed from that situation? They've always said, well, our main goal is not to take away the kids. It's
Correct.
to keep them inside with the parents. Like the goal is to keep a family united.
Right.
So that being the big question still is like, why were these children still allowed in that house? We want to go ahead and bring in Libby Cathy. You have been down in Vinton, Gallia, Hocking counties, all trying to figure out putting this together. And really there is a lot of this story that comes together that really ties into just some of the realities of living in rural counties.
Absolutely. And this week I spoke with Lisa Carroll, who founded God's Hands at Work, which is trying to fill some of that need in these rural counties. She founded it 13 years ago because this area is so impoverished, she said, and because the need is so great. And so her organization is meant to kind of fill the gaps that the system can't, provide food, basic necessities. They help some 4,000 families a year. And one of these families was the Siders. And that's something we found out this week. This is new information. And she kind of detailed some of these interactions. And we can go through them right now. She said that Christina Siders was the only one who actually came inside of the center, and that she visited some 17 times at least in the last 4 years. She said that Gary Siders Sr. always waited in the car, but Christina Siders coming in and getting the items, that kind of matches with what prosecutors are saying as well, that she was kind of the head of the household here. So she describes Christina as a little backward, not very forthcoming, but also kind, didn't have an odor or anything, wasn't dressed in her Sunday finest, she said, but that's not uncommon in that area. But she said that she was not very forthcoming with information on the children. And that's when really red flags started to go off. She never saw the children. She always thought that they were in school because that's the time of day Christina Siders was coming. But as this family grew, their needs grew. And that's when Lisa Carroll and her staff kind of started to question things. As we've talked here, it's not uncommon to have a big family, but when they first came to the center, 4 years ago, it was 10 or 11 children. Now it was 16 children. And Lisa Carroll just, asked, well, it's a lot of kids in a short amount of time. We're having to have more needs. Can you verify these children exist? Because they've had issues in the past with maybe people selling the items. But when she tried to verify that, she was not able to do that. And Christina Siders actually never came back. Let's take a listen to what she said.
Because kind of backward. She seemed a little bit backward, not very forthcoming with her information at all when we would ask for birth dates and names and that kind of stuff. And she would say it was because there were so many. It was hard to keep track, which I'm sure it probably was. She never had any kind of paperwork with her that we would normally require. Even though we are a need-based program, we still like to see, when it's a family that large, that it's legitimate. So when we offered to help get them, then she said, well, I'll bring them next time then. And the next time she said she forgot them. And then the third time we were very stern with her that we have to have these or we can't serve you again the next time. And she never came back after that. And that was in March of this year.
Libby, and you can speak to this in Gallia County. Of course, you've been to Vinton County too. These court documents that we got kind of shedding a light in more areas and locations where this family has had footprints. We are finally hearing from more people who have known them, who have interacted with them. But I want to go back to the beginning, and I think this is what makes this case so complex, is that we've heard from neighbors time and time again, we didn't know. We didn't know there was that many children there. We didn't know they had this huge family. We didn't know this was going on. So, we talk about their home on Ohmer Street, back in that wooded area. We've both been there. We've seen that. It's kind of secluded. So I think it just speaks to the complexity of this case. But, for the first time, we are really hearing from someone who's interacted with this family, and it's just shedding so much light on, what they were like and what they wore and how many times they came in for help. And I know you mentioned, too, that they ended up coming into that shelter. Can you talk about that?
Yes, they never came back after that time. And you're right. Some people at food pantries seem to have interacted with them, but neighbors, that's a common theme. They did not know. And Lisa Carroll doesn't go and visit these people at their home. She's serving 4,000 families a year. Mm-hmm. She, can't track everything. And we've talked in the past too about how you want to be neighborly, but also mind your business, and you mind your neighbor's business there. So we've talked about that, Colin. This week, I went to another home that the Siders lived at in Gallia County, talked to a new neighbor there, and she said she's lived there since 2016, so that would have been the time the Siders were there. She never saw them. She never saw Gary Siders Sr. sitting on the front porch, as some neighbors have said. She did say her nephew saw the children, and that in the yard one day, went over, tried to play with them. They were not allowed to leave the yard. That was the extent of the interaction, but clearly they were keeping to themselves. And that's something Lisa Carroll said as well, that, she serves a lot of different families, but it seems to her that the Siders were trying to stay hidden. She also, again, doesn't go and visit these families, but they do keep track of addresses. And she said their address changed several times in that 4 years. So that's a challenge for these caseworkers as well.
Right, because I think she mentioned that the address that they had on file for this family was actually in neighboring Jackson County.
Absolutely.
So they had moved in that time. And I think one of the other things was, as you mentioned, like they don't go and do house checks on these families. But it was when all of this started coming to light that she was like, wait, that Christina Siders is our Christina Siders.
Yes, and she actually, the day that this broke on June 30th, when we were there out front and watching authorities take materials out of the house, she said, those are our food pantry boxes. I recognize those. Siders, that's the family that we help. And so it was shocking for her, she said.
And what did she have to say about the system being overwhelmed in these rural counties?
She said that, that's why her organization exists, because there is so much need and the system just cannot handle this. I also want to note that one theme that she said is the guilt that she has now, and that's a theme with all of these neighbors. She says this eats away at her. How did she miss this? Because she is a trained Head Start teacher. She's supposed to, she says, see this kind of neglect, but she also thought the kids were in school. Still, knowing what she knows now, she wishes she would have called someone sooner. But again, there is just so much need. There is so many cases that it is very easy, she said, for someone to slip through the cracks. Let's take a listen.
For the first couple weeks, I couldn't sleep. I cried. It's so hard in this situation because as a former Head Start teacher who is trained in child abuse and child neglect and all those things, I'm like, how did I miss this? How did I not know? But of course, I never saw the children to see any kind of neglect. The fact that I didn't see the children, I didn't take as neglect because, like I said, how would you get that many here? And and they should have been in school, so I'd never thought anything. We are actually rethinking our process now as a board to say, maybe we should be asking for more information. In a rural area like this where the caseload is so high, we have so many people in need. And when they move around a lot, if they do get established somewhere, then there's changes that happen within those organizations with staff and everything. And I think sometimes they just fall between the cracks.
Okay, so in the first time between the two Gallia County filings, the first one, the Siders, they had 9 children, and then the second time they had 10. We know over the course of their relationship, and Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth, they were married at 15 years old. They basically had a child every single year.
And I think all of you guys can agree with this, and something that whenever children are involved, especially this many children, the public wants to blame someone. They want there to be responsibility on it. Governor DeWine's talked about that. We'll get there in a little bit. But, why did this slip through the cracks? Why was there not an intervention sooner? And as we are learning all these pieces, we're unfolding and uncovering new layers about the history. They've been in the system. They've been known. How did this happen? Again, I asked Otis Crocker, the Athens County Children's Services Director. Once again, want to say he's not involved in this case, but, I want to play his answer to when it comes to responsibility of these kinds of cases.
The public wants to put blame on someone. They want there to be responsibility for someone. What are your thoughts on that?
It's easy to go back and look and say, well, why didn't they move a child? I don't know what those case plans looked like. I don't know what type of progress was being made at the time. Sometimes it's difficult to see a child even. A parent might try to or just the schedules don't work out to where you're able to see a child at a certain time. And so then you got to go back the following week. So depending on the timing of things, also affects the outcome. So there's some people who will sit and they'll, like I said, they'll make calls of why this happened. But you really don't know unless you're actually in there.
That something else, too, that he mentioned, which I thought was important to know in these court documents, it did say that some of the caseworkers saw insect bites on arms along with scratches. He said to me, there's a lot that goes into that investigation. There could be kids playing outside, you get bug bites. I've got bug bites on me right now. Does that necessarily mean abuse or neglect? But then we read further and find that there were roaches, gnats, and flies in the house. That could be a more serious issue. So there's a lot that goes into uncovering, is this just children being children running around, or is this a serious matter?
Right, and it kind of also is one of those things of like a bunch of different things might not hit that bar of reaching that abuse or neglect level, but now from the 1,000-foot view of seeing all of this all at once, those old records now kind of hold a significant value in all of this. So all of those pieces are coming together.
And I love that you said that, and he mentioned that as well. He said, of course, now when we can see the whole forest, it's like, oh, the picture's clear. But if you're just seeing a little portion, if you're just looking at one little tree, you're not getting the whole image of what happened. We are now uncovering more of those layers as this investigation's going. We have 2 new men that are charged that have connection with the Siders family. It's kind of all unraveling, and we're able to see a bigger picture that maybe years ago wasn't as clear.
Right. And we spoke to Governor DeWine about this, and basically he's going to do an action review. And 10 TV learned that this is going to be completed by the end of the year because, I mean, this is making headlines. People want answers. And when children are involved, like you said, people don't want someone to blame entirely, but they do want clarity on how exactly this happened.
There's so much
Whenever
interest
there's a
in
tragedy
this case.
like this, we have an after-action review, which we're in the process of doing to make sure we understand exactly what happened and who was at fault and who is responsible. How in the world in 2026 and 2025 and this period of time in our history, how can that happen? And so we will finish our own report, our own investigation.
And I think that's so important. I mean, that's the big question with all of this. It started back in 2020. 6 years later, everyone's asking, how could this have
Is it
happened?
different departments not sharing information
Right.
enough with each other? That's all going to come out in that review, which 10 TV did get him to commit to releasing that by the end of the year.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your important work that you're doing on this story. We appreciate the both of you so much. And thank you for joining us for this part 3 of our special.
Yeah, and make sure to catch The Big Picture streaming weekday mornings at 9 on the 10 TV app. You can also listen later wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, all 3 editions of this released as bonus episodes of the podcast.